Thank you for your response, Mynoo. I will say that your previous response was an excellent response, whereas here we're going to part ways because I don't agree with many of the things that you said on how you would improve the EU. Firstly, you fail to recognise one of the major points that prevents the EU and other major countries, including the United States, from becoming fully independent of the Middle East, and that is oil. We must get ourselves off of oil, and that's one of the ways I would improve the EU is by getting energy independence from the Middle East. The way to do this would be by increasing research and development infrastructure and improving the way that we spend the money. By doing this, we can get fusion power eventually and get off of oil. This would also make the euro a more viable reserve currency status currency. Now, we would want this to be the case that we need to get the euro to be the reserve currency so that we can export and import energy which we would be self-sufficient in. So we would be able to buy and sell imports and exports with and use the money that we use to pay for them by investing them in European banks. Now, you spoke of the EU becoming a kind of territorial global empire. I partly disagree with you there because I don't think that's how the EU should function. The EU is not a new Roman Empire. That is the mistake that the Americans made, and they went for a territorial empire in Iraq and it became a disaster. A partial disaster, I should say. Now, a Pyrrhic victory. One of the things that you did say about the Commonwealth, which is quite interesting, which might work, would be if we included Canada in the EU. I think that could work. That is one point where you and I do not disagree on. Canada could be an EU candidate member, as it's as much a European country and more as England, and more so a European country than Turkey, although it is not strictly on the European continent. You can say that Greenland is on the European continental shelf. But in his speech, David Miliband said that the EU should expand beyond the borders of Europe and thus create a co-prosperity sphere around Europe, which I mentioned in my last video. I would also say that we must have a Euro Treasury bond so that we are able to borrow money, or rather that we can become a creditor of other countries, so that instead of borrowing money that we can send loans out to other countries and that they can borrow from us. We were trying to make the euro a much more equitable currency with the other nations of the world and not use it as a big stick to hit them over the head with like the US dollar has been. Bad practice has always followed the route towards empire, and I would not want the European Union to become an empire. I would instead want it to become a continental hyperpower with global influence, which used its global influence to help people become educated, to have a rational mindset, and thus that would defeat terrorism by subverting terrorism away from violence towards people becoming rational, adaptive and educated in the ways that they to create an empire of liberty rather than an empire of force. You seem to be talking about an empire of force, and so this would, to me, would mean that we're going down the route of an old British Empire style situation. Surely, yeah, we will need a strong EU military, but as I mentioned before, the EU strategy was being to use incrementalism to slowly change the way people think, the way people choose their laws, the way people act, and so thus defeating not people, but problems that may occur in the future. Also, we need a EU cabinet and a president that is directly elected, sorry, a chancellor that is directly elected by the people, and a president that is elected by parliament, so that you have a system that is more like the German system, where you have a chancellor with real power and a president who is the arbiter and protector of the law and the constitution. We must have an EU armed forces which swear allegiance to a constitution, so that they're swearing allegiance to law and to God, if God is to be in the constitution at all. So that no one individual can overtake and take over the EU and turn it into a dictatorship. There must be safeguards throughout the law in this respect. Further to the Commonwealth, I believe that there should be a Southern African Union and an East African Union, and that the EU should thus bring in its sphere of influence all the Commonwealth countries, but not have military bases there, but not necessarily be an imperial power, that we should only be there as guests. The colonisation of the Boer homelands in South Africa by Europeans, I think, would be totally justified. If you've seen my other video, you'll see why, because those people have been exterminated for the last 10 years on a pogrom by the South African ANC government. But surely our biggest problem is the Bin Laden crime family and the Saudi crime family. And so I would take a slightly tougher line with Israel, and I would take a much tougher line with Saudi Arabia. I think that's our greatest security threat, is Saudi Arabia and the Bin Laden crime family. So to improve the EU, I would go for clean energy, which would cut the supply of funding to the Bin Laden crime family, and I would build up a military force to be within the sphere of a postmodern power, so that our economic force is always greater than our military force. And I would have a clear constitutional framework which you made one man, one vote for all the countries in the EU. But I think it's important that the leading countries, England and Germany, stay the core of the EU and are the leadership of the EU in some ways. But we should still be very subtle in that, because we want other people to feel involved. Yes, Ukraine and Belarus, I think we can agree that those countries, and Turkey and Azerbaijan and Georgia, should come into the EU eventually. I would even welcome in Iran eventually if it became a less Islamic country. I think Turkey and Iran could become moderate Islamic countries, and they could be allowed to become into the EU. There are Indo-European peoples after all. On the subject of human rights, the Constitution of the EU already protects human, economic, natural rights. That is the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness and property. And so, therefore, we are already protected by the Lisbon Treaty. So, thank you for listening, and I think we'll make the next video our conclusion on the InfoCamp Mynoo 100 debate on Europe. Thank you for listening.